What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper, and in this video I want to show you guys how to clean a revolver. I'm going to show you guys exactly how I clean my revolvers from start to finish. I'm going to show you guys exactly what kind of tools I use and the techniques that I use to get my revolvers very clean and to extend the life of my revolvers by cleaning them properly and taking good care of them, which is very important. You have to take good care of your firearms. You have to clean them regularly, and you have to make sure you clean them properly. Now, there are times where you don't clean a firearm, and that has mostly to do with precision shooting, and I'm going to do a separate video on that. And that's a whole different topic, so I'm not going to discuss it now, but there are times where you will leave a firearm dirty, and it has to do with precision shooting, okay, and fouling out the bore. But in this video, I just want to show you exactly how I clean my revolvers. And today we're going to be cleaning my 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum. This is a 6.5-inch barrel revolver, and it's chambered in the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum cartridge, and this is the most powerful handgun in the world. It can generate almost 3,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, making it as powerful as 30-06 or 7mm Rem Mag. All right, so we're going to clean this gun today. I'm going to show you all the tools I use. I'm going to show you exactly how I do it. But before I get into that, I want to just discuss the three types of cleaning that you're going to do for your guns, okay? There's what I call quick cleaning, then there's basic cleaning, and then you have deep cleaning, okay? Quick cleaning is just if you're going to be, let's say, shooting in a couple of days, and you just went shooting, let's say, yesterday, and you plan to go shooting again tomorrow or in a few days, and you don't want to sit down for an hour or two and do a deep clean on your gun because you're going to get it dirty again in a couple of days, but you want to quickly clean the gun, and that's what I call a quick clean. And in order to do a quick clean, all you do is you just clean the bore out, the bore and the chambers inside of the cylinder with what's called a bore mop, okay? You could either use a bore mop or you could just use basic patches, okay? But in this video, we're not going to discuss quick cleaning. We're going to discuss basic cleaning, and I'm going to show you guys how I do a basic clean. And I'll do another video on deep cleaning, okay? Deep cleaning is another topic in itself, and it's very detailed, so I can't do, everything in one video. So we're just going to do a video today on basic cleaning, how to clean your revolver from start to finish. Basic cleaning, not quick clean, not deep clean. Okay, so quick clean, again, is just you're going to use a bore mop and you're going to soak it in solvent, and you're going to attach your bore mop to a cleaning rod, okay, and you're going to rub this through the bore, okay, and through the chambers with some solvent, and you're just going to rub it until it comes out clean, okay, and then you're going to run a few patches through it, and you're going to run dry patches through the bore and through the chambers after you run a solvent-soaked bore mop through a couple of times, and that'll just get most of the buildup inside out, okay? It'll clean out most of the fouling. Now, you can scrub it if you want, but if you're going to be shooting in a couple of days, there's no sense in scrubbing with a brush, okay? That's a quick clean. Now, deep clean is pretty much the same thing as a basic clean, which is what I'm going to show you guys in this video. But with the deep clean, you're going to do a couple of extra things, and you're going to go a few steps further. So first, I want to show you the tools that you're going to need. And before I show you the tools you're going to need, I want to just cover some basic safety things and some basic guidelines for when you're cleaning. So the first thing you want to do is you want to check your firearm and make sure it's not loaded. Make sure there's no cartridges in the chamber. And here you guys can see, if you look through the cylinders, you can see there's no cartridges inside of this cylinder here. Okay, so we're clear with this gun. And after you make sure your gun is safe, you want to think about safety while you're cleaning. So I always like to wear a pair of disposable gloves because you're going to be getting solvent on your fingers, and solvent will actually eat away at your skin. So if you're cleaning your gun for an hour or so, you're going to be getting a lot of solvent on your skin, and you're going to start to get cracked skin on your fingertips, and you're going to get dry skin, and your skin's going to peel off. And also it's hard to clean that solvent smell off of your fingertips. Okay, so invest in a box of disposable gloves. You know, you can buy them for, you know, $5 or $10. You can get 50 gloves. You know, make sure it's the right size. You don't want to get a small glove. It's gonna pop when you put it on if it's too small. All right, so get yourself some gloves. Protect your skin on your hands. You also want to consider getting some safety glasses, because if you're going to be doing a lot of heavy scrubbing, there's a potential that you could possibly get some solvent splash into your eye. So I also like to wear safety glasses as well, especially if I'm going to be doing a lot more scrubbing and the gun is very dirty. I'll put some safety glasses on. All right, so we got the safety aspects out of the way. Now I want to cover some other things. First of all, you're going to want to get a good table. Okay, you're going to want to clean on some type of a table. Now, you want to make sure the table that you're cleaning on is not something like your dining room table or your kitchen table, because the solvent is very corrosive and it'll eat away at any kind of fancy table. All right, so don't use a fancy table. Don't clean on your dining room table. Don't clean on your kitchen table. Here, what I'm cleaning on is just a sheet of plywood, and I have some sawhorses underneath, and I just made a makeshift table. I have a white folding table from plastic that I normally use, but I'm in the process of moving to Tennessee right now, so I've packed up a lot of my stuff. So all I did was I had a sheet of plywood laying around, and I got some sawhorses, and I made a table. And I'm not worried about the plywood because it's just some scrap plywood, so if I get solvent or oil or, you know, some kind of dirt on there, I don't really care. Okay, so get yourself a good table. I personally like to just use a sheet of plywood and some sawhorses, but you can get like a plastic folding table, but don't use, you know, your kitchen table or your dining room table. Okay, now another thing you're going to want to get is you're going to want to get some kind of a cloth that you can put your gun on top of, some type of a mat. Okay, this is just a mat that's made by Allen, and I got this at Walmart for like $5, and it's just like some type of looks like a silicone mat. Okay, because you don't want to scratch the finish on your gun. Okay, so if you don't have one of these mats, you can just get like a towel or something and put a towel down. All right, now I'm going to show you guys exactly what kind of tools you're going to need. But before I do that, I just want to mention something. I always like to bring my laptop, so this way I could watch a YouTube video or catch up on a live stream of some of my favorite YouTubers. And it makes cleaning a lot more enjoyable because you have something else to focus on, and it makes it less boring. So I recommend, you know, bringing your computer downstairs into your basement or wherever you're going to be cleaning, and, you know, watch some YouTube videos to make it a little bit less boring. Now, another thing too is where you're going to be cleaning. You don't want to clean, you know, in your kitchen or something like that, because it's going to smell very bad and your wife may complain about it. So try not to clean in any area that you're going to be frequenting. So I want to show you guys the basic tools that you're going to need. So the first thing you're going to want to have is you're going to want to have some kind of a screwdriver set. This is just a basic gunsmithing screwdriver set from Wheeler Engineering. And we're going to need that to take apart the gun. You're going to need some cleaning patches. And here I just have 2 brands of cleaning patches. I have some Birchwood Casey, and these are 12 gauge cleaning patches here. Okay, and the reason why I use 12 gauge is I'll explain to you guys that later on, but you want to have some 12 gauge cleaning patches. And I like these Birchwood Casey patches because they're not like a traditional cotton cleaning patch where you're going to have all the strings and all the pieces of cotton that are going to get stuck in your bore, which could pose a safety hazard later on when you're shooting. So these are like a specially woven patch that, you know, it doesn't leave any leftover like strings or anything like that. As you guys could see, it's a very durable patch, and the way that they sew it, for some reason, you don't get that, you know, the strings and all the other stuff with regular cotton. So I recommend these Birchwood Casey cleaning patches for 12 gauge, and I'll explain to you later why you need 12 gauge. And then I also have some Butch's triple twill. I like the Butch's triple twill because, again, it's like a very tightly woven cotton, and it doesn't leave all the little strings in your bore, okay, which can cause a high pressure situation if you have, you know, some leftover string from your cotton cleaning patch and it gets lodged inside of one of your ports on your muzzle brake or in your bore. It could cause a problem. So those are the two brands that I like: Butch's triple twill and Birchwood Casey 12 gauge patches. And so with the Butch's triple twill, I always make sure I get for the right caliber. This is a 50 caliber, and these patches are for 45 to 58 cal, okay? And this is what we're going to use to clean the actual bore. And the 12 gauge patches we're going to use more for exterior cleaning and for cleaning the chambers, okay? So that's why we have two of them. Now, if you have a hard time finding the correct size of patch on the internet when you're ordering your patches, don't sweat it, okay? Just get yourself some 12 gauge patches and you can cut these down to the right size that you need. That's why I always recommend people get 12 gauge patches, even if you don't have a 12 gauge shotgun, because they're so big, okay? I believe they're 3 by 3 inch. You can cut these down to any size, okay? What I actually do with these is I'll fold them and cut them into quadrants, okay? And I'll use that for my 30 cal rifles, okay? So what I'll do is I'll cut this once in half and then again in half, and I'll get 4 30 cal patches out of one of these 12 gauge patches, okay? So that's why I recommend the 12 gauge patches, because you can always cut them down to size. Moving on from the patches, you're going to want obviously some solvent. I like to use some Hoppe's number 9 for my revolvers, and for rifles I use other types of cleaning solvents. I use special cleaning solvents for rifles because rifles are more sensitive to solvents, and you really want to pay attention to what kind of solvents you're using, especially for precision rifles and rifles that you want to keep accurate. But for revolvers are not a precision weapon, so we don't have to be as anal about what kind of solvent we're going to use. So I just use some Hoppe's number 9, and Hoppe's number 9 is good because it has a little bit of ammonia in it, so it can take a little bit of copper off in addition to lead and powder residue and carbon buildup. So the Hoppe's number 9 will work on all types of residues that you get, all types of fouling: copper, carbon, lead, and powder residue. Okay, so Hoppe's number 9, it's a good general purpose solvent. It'll clean pretty much any kind of fouling, and that's what I use for my revolvers. Now you're going to want to get yourself a cleaning rod, okay, and this is just a basic aluminum cleaning rod, okay. You're going to want some patch eyelets here, okay, for patches. This is made by J. Dewey. This is a brass eyelet for your patches, okay. It's made from brass. I don't like the plastic ones because the plastic ones can break. So I got this brass one here. It's well worth the money. It's kind of on the expensive side. I think it was like $5 or maybe like $8, I think. But you get one of these brass ones and it'll last you a lifetime, you know, because the plastic ones, they tend to break. You know, if you put a lot of pressure on it, you're trying to push a patch through, you can snap those plastic ones, all right? So get yourself a brass eyelet for your cleaning patches. You're also going to need some brushes. Okay, here I just have a basic phosphor brush. This is a 50 cal phosphor brush, and we're going to use that to clean the bore and the chambers on the cylinder. Here we have a nylon brush. Okay, nylon is good because it's a little bit less harsh. It doesn't scratch metal. And we're also going to want a toothbrush. Okay, just get some toothbrushes. These are really good to have. And you're going to want also a copper or phosphor toothbrush type thing here. This is a gun cleaning brush, and it's got this narrower section here, so you can use this to get into tighter spaces like around the forcing cone. And then it's got a larger brush here for brushing larger areas, okay? And we also have some Q-tips here. Okay, I keep some Q-tips, also good for getting into tight spaces. And what I do is I actually keep all my cleaning supplies in this little leather toiletry pouch. You know, this thing has like a bunch of pockets, and I got like a little carry handle here. And I always bring this with me when I go to the range in case I want to clean my gun at the range. But I got this little pouch here, and I keep everything inside of here. And I obviously have more stuff than just what's in this pouch. This is just for, like, you know, quick response cleaning, I guess you could say. You know, I have my stockpile of cleaning supplies in containers, but this is my sort of like my toolkit, if you will. All right. So I went over all the tools. I showed you guys everything you're going to need, and now I'm going to show you exactly how to clean your guns. All right, guys, so the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take the cylinder off. So this way we can clean it better and get more detailed with our cleaning. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our screwdriver and we're going to loosen this screw right here, okay? And this screw is going to help us take the cylinder off. Now, if you were to do a deep clean, which I'll do a separate video, you're going to want to take the grip off. And to do that, there's a screw on the bottom here on this Smith & Wesson. There's a screw right here on the bottom. And the grip would slide off. And then you have some screws here. There's 3 screws here, and that would take this plate off, the side plate, okay? And once you take the side plate off, you can take all the parts out. You can take the trigger mechanisms out and clean them individually. And that's the deep clean portion. And then when you take the grip off, you can clean around the frame here underneath the grip. You can oil it. All right, but that's a deep clean. I usually don't do a deep clean more than once every 6 months, okay? If for normal use, you know, normal conditions, you know, let's say I take this thing out to the range once a month. I go hiking with it maybe once a month during the warmer months, and then I go hunting with it a few times. That's what I consider normal use. And unless I, you know, drop this thing in some mud or something crazy happen, I don't really do a deep clean more than once every 6 months, okay? My basic clean, which is what we're doing today, I usually do that if I know that I haven't done a full basic clean in a while. And the quick clean, like I said, you only do a quick clean if you're expecting to shoot again and you just want to quickly clean the bore out and the chambers out. All right, so we're going to take this screw off here now so we can get the cylinder off. Okay. And when you're using your screwdriver, make sure you have the right size tip, okay? So this way you don't destroy the screw, all right? And make sure you don't lose the screw either. All right, it's a very small screw here. Look at how small this screw is. So make sure you don't lose this thing. All right, put it in a safe place. I like to put it inside of my screwdriver kit here so I don't lose it. We're going to take the crane off right now. All right, so now we got our cylinder and our crane are off. Okay, and we're going to need to do a clean of all this stuff here in the cylinder. So now we got our frame and our barrel and our bore. And we're going to start with the bore first, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to thread our eyelet onto the cleaning rod. All right. And we're going to run a patch through it. You're going to fold your patch in half, and you're going to slide the patch through the eyelet here. All right. Okay, and then what I like to do is I like to spread. Once you slide it through, I like to spread the patch out, okay, like this. So it's making maximum contact inside of the bore. And I almost forgot to put my gloves on, so let me do that real quick. Now, another thing you're going to want to do is make sure you have good lighting. I have 2 lights right now. I have my ceiling light, and then I also have this little desk light here, okay, because you're going to want to be able to see all the fouling. So we're going to take our clean, dry bore patch, and we're going to dip it in the solvent. Okay, and you want that patch to be nice and wet with solvent. You can shake off any excess into the bottle, so you don't want to waste your solvent. And we're going to run the patch through the bore, okay? And when you're doing this, you want to be very careful that you don't damage the crown on the muzzle. The crown is where the rifling ends at the muzzle, and that's a very important area for accuracy and stabilizing the bullet, because it's the last bit of rifling that the bullet encounters before it exits the muzzle. So if you're too aggressive when you're pushing your patches through the barrel, you can damage the crown, okay? You can damage that little bit of rifling on the muzzle, all right? And that's going to affect the accuracy. So we're going to take this wet patch here with solvent, and we're going to pass it through a couple of times, nice and carefully, to make sure we don't damage the crown, okay? And we're going to pass it through 5 to 10 times to make sure we get that solvent in the barrel, okay? Okay, you can already see the patch is a little bit dirty here. I don't know if you guys can see or not. A little bit dirty, okay? And what we're going to do is we're just going to let this sit for a minute or two, okay? No rush. We want to let that solvent act, all right? You don't want to do it too fast and just immediately go to a brush or a patch. You want to let the solvent soak into the fouling and break up the fouling on its own. Now we're going to turn our attention to the chambers, okay? We're going to run this same patch that we used for the bore into the chambers, okay? We're going to run it through a couple of times for each chamber. All right, and don't worry if it comes out dirty. You can see it's already black, okay? Don't worry about that. Just keep going and run it through all of the chambers, okay? You can see it's getting really dark now. A lot of fouling on this patch. All right, don't worry about whether it's dirty or not. Just run it through all the chambers a couple of times, 3-4 times through each chamber, okay? All right, because we just want to get that solvent inside the chamber and soak it with solvent so this way it can start to act on the fouling, all right? All right, so now we're going to let the cylinder sit for a minute or two with the solvent inside. Okay, and look at how dirty this patch is already. This is just the first patch. All right, you can see it's basically black. All right, look at that. Very dark. All right, so we're going to let the cylinder sit for a minute, and then we're going to turn our attention back to the bore. So now what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to take our brush and we're going to thread our brush onto our cleaning rod, and we're going to scrub the inside of the bore. Okay, and what this is going to do is just scrub out all the fouling. Okay, and we want to, when we do this, I actually don't like to use the black part here, the handle. I don't like to grab the handle like this, because when you grab the handle like this, you get less control over the cleaning rod because it's so far away from the actual brush. I like to choke up on it, and I'll actually hold the rod itself, okay? I'll hold the rod itself like this. This way I can get more control over the brush, and it'll help me to protect the crown, okay? And we're gonna just brush in and out 10 to 20 times, okay? Again, making sure that you don't scrape the rifling with the brush. I'm sorry, making sure that you don't scrape the rifling with the cleaning rod, okay? We don't want to wear out the crown because that's a very important part of the bore. All right, I like to scrub it about 20 times the first time. And you don't really have to do that much scrubbing. I only scrub it like 3 or 4 times. And after you scrub it like 3 or 4 times, the rest of the cleaning you do with just patches, okay? But initially, the first time, you want to give it a good scrubbing. And that first initial scrubbing is going to get a lot of the fouling off of the bore, okay? All right, so we're going to take our brush off now. And now we're going to thread a dry patch. And the dry patch is going to take out all the stuff that we just scrubbed. Okay, it's going to clean everything out. All right, so we're going to take our dry patch now, and we're going to run it through the bore. And we're going to try to get this fouling that we just scrubbed out of the bore. Okay. Pass it in and out a couple of times. Don't be afraid. Okay, pass it in and out a few times. You can even twist it as you're pushing it through. I like to twist it a little bit. Okay, just like so. All right, and now you can see just how dirty it was inside the bore. Okay, look at this disgusting fouling here. Okay. So now we're going to continue. We're going to wet another dry patch with solvent. And then we're going to use our brush again. And then we're going to do another dry patch. And we're going to keep doing that about 3 or 4 times. And then once we do that about 3 or 4 times, 3 or 4 repetitions, okay, solvent soaked patch, then brush, and then just a dry patch. We're going to do that 3 or 4 times. And then after we do it 3 or 4 times, we're going to look down the bore, and we're going to look and see if there's any kind of major deposits inside. And if it looks pretty clean for the most part, if it's pretty smooth, you can tell if there's any major deposits when you look down the bore and you look at the rifling. If it looks pretty shiny and pretty smooth, then you know that you don't have to scrub anymore with the brush. Okay, then you can take your brush and put it away. And then from this moment on, once you're done with the brush, you're just going to be using patches to clean the rest of the bore. Okay. Now, before we do our second round with the brush, we want to go back to our chambers here because the solvent's been sitting inside of the chambers. And you never want to let the solvent sit for too long. Okay, because solvent can damage metal if it sits for too long, especially any kind of solvent that has ammonia in it or some kind of copper solvent. It's very aggressive on metal, so you don't want to let it sit too long. So we're going to come back to the chambers here, and we're going to wipe out the solvent and clean out the chambers, okay? So let's do that now before we go back to the bore and continue on with the bore, okay? And we are going to use a brush inside the chambers as well. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to do the bore and the cylinder. I like to go back and forth between them. So what I'll do is I'll soak the solvent in the chambers, and while this is soaking, I'll go and do a repetition in the bore here with the brush and the dry patch, and then I'll go back to the cylinder and do another repetition there with the brush. Okay, we're going to do the brush inside of the cylinder as well. Usually you don't really need it. You can kind of look down the cylinder and you can look through the chambers. And if you don't see any major deposits, you don't really need to use a brush. But for the sake of the video, I'll show you guys how to use the brush in the chambers. Now you can get special chamber brushes that are specially made for cleaning out the chambers. And usually I don't bother with those. My chambers usually don't get that dirty. Okay, but you can get special chamber brushes. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run another wet patch of solvent through the chambers and through the bore, and we're going to do a few repetitions, and then we're going to turn our attention towards the outsides of the gun. Once we get the bore and the chambers clean, we're going to turn our attention to the outsides of the gun. So I'm going to get to work now, and I'm going to work on the bore and the chambers. I'm going to do a few repetitions with the brush, and once we're done with the brush, we're going to go just strictly patches, okay? All right, guys, so we just did our second round of cleaning for the cylinder and the bore, and I want to show you how quickly the bore has gotten clean. So these were our first two patches. This is the one that was soaked in solvent, and you can see how dirty it was. And this was the dry patch that I ran through after I scrubbed with the bore scrub. And this is our second round, and you can see the difference here, how much cleaner the patches are starting to get. Okay, look at the difference here, guys. Okay. So, and this is only our second round of cleaning, all right? So we're going to do a third round with the brush, and we're going to try to get the rest of the deposits out from the bore, okay? And it's always easier to clean your firearms regularly rather than just letting them to get really dirty. Because if you let them get really dirty and you fire hundreds and hundreds of rounds and you wait months to clean, the deposits are going to be so thick it's going to take you hours to clean. Okay, but if you clean regularly after every trip to the range, even if you just take a bore mop and you do a quick clean, it's better than not cleaning at all. You know, if let's say you don't have time to sit down for an hour or two to do a full basic clean, just take a bore mop, soak it in solvent, and run it through the barrel, run it through the chambers, okay, rather than just letting it sit dirty for months, okay? All right, guys, so we did 3 rounds with the brush. We're done with the brush. We've moved on to just using the patches now, and the patches are coming out cleaner and cleaner. And what we're going to do to finish up is we're going to take this nylon brush here and we're going to wrap a patch around it like so. Okay, we're going to wrap a patch around the nylon brush, and then we're going to push it through the bore and through the chambers to make sure that we got everything out that we possibly can. And that'll be our test to see if it's fully clean or not. If it comes out still pretty dirty after running it through, wrapped around the nylon brush, if it still comes out pretty dirty, that means that we have to go back and do a few more passes with our patches or with our copper brush here, okay? So I'm going to continue with the patches, a couple of more rounds, maybe 2 more rounds for the bore and 2 more rounds for the chambers. And then we're going to run our nylon brush wrapped in 1 patch to see if they're clean or not, okay? All right, guys, so we just did our 2nd round with the patches, and we did 3 rounds with the brush. And look at this patch here. It's just totally clean. There's nothing coming off of the bore or the chamber, so that tells me that we're very, very clean. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to save this patch because it's already soaked in solvent. And to conserve on solvent, I'm going to reuse this patch to clean the outside of the gun later. Okay, once we're done with the bore and the chambers. So I'm going to pass a dry patch now through the bore and the chambers and see how clean they are. If they come out pretty clean, we're going to do our nylon brush test to see if it's clean with the nylon brush. And if it passes the nylon brush test, then we're going to move on to other parts of the gun. But the most important part to clean is your bore and your chambers, okay? Especially your bore. You don't want your bore to get fouled, and you don't want to leave the fouling in there, especially for a revolver. If we're talking about precision rifles, that's different. You want to have a certain amount of fouling to increase your accuracy. But your revolvers, you don't really have to worry about that because you're not shooting at 1,000 yards with a revolver. So you definitely want to clean it as much as you can. Okay, and I'm surprised at how quickly it took to clean the bore and the chambers. I only did 5 rounds total so far, 3 rounds with the copper brush and 2 rounds with just the patches. And so far the bore and the chambers are coming out very clean. So this is the last patch, dry patch. You can see it's 100% clean, 99% clean, okay? There's a little bit of discoloration here, but I'm not too concerned about that, okay? So I would say that the bore and the chambers are clean now, and we're going to do our test. We're going to take our nylon. Actually, before we do, so to do our test, what we're going to do is we're going to take 1 more patch and soak it in solvent. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to reuse this old patch that I already used before because it was so clean, and I'm just going to reuse it rather than soaking a new one, okay? And we're just going to run this through the bore now. All right, we're going to get the inside of that bore nice and wet with solvent. Now we're going to take our nylon brush. We're going to take a clean patch and we're going to wrap it around the nylon brush like so. Okay. All right, we got it nice and tight wrapped, and we're just going to push it through the bore. And it should come out pretty clean, okay? And it came out pretty clean. Look at that. A little bit of dirt here, but I think this is just from the bristles on the brush, okay? You can see there's a little bit of discoloration there on the patch. That's just from the bristles. You guys have to remember that these brushes, they get dirty, okay? When you clean with them, the fouling gets inside of the bristles and it stays there, okay? And you can be cleaning, you know, for hours, and you're gonna think that the bore is really dirty, but it's not. It's just the bristles in your brush have fouling and solvent stuck inside of them. And every time you use the brush, it's gonna rub off some of that fouling back into your bore, and you're just going to keep going, and you're going to do it all day long, and you're going to think that your bore is really dirty, but it's not. That's why I only suggest doing about 3 passes with the brush, and then after that going to patches, okay? And here you can see on this patch, the little bit of discoloration is probably from the bristles of this nylon brush that still have some fouling in it, okay? So we're going to say that this is pretty clean. And now we're going to do the same thing with our chambers. We're going to run a wet patch through the chambers, and then we're going to run a dry patch wrapped around the nylon brush. And we're going to make sure that the chambers are nice and clean. All right, guys, so I just ran a patch around my nylon brush through the chambers, and you can see the patch is really clean. So we're going to say that this is already clean. And the bore is clean, we're good to go. So now I'm just gonna do one final pass with a solvent dipped patch through the bore and through the chambers. And then we're gonna do one final pass with a dry patch. But this time what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the 12 gauge patch because it's a little bit bigger. And what it's gonna do is it's gonna catch a lot more of the solvent that's still inside of the bore and inside of the chambers. So, and what this is going to do is just get all of the solvent out of the bore and out of the chambers, because you don't want to have solvent inside of the bore and the chambers before you shoot again, because that can increase the pressure and you could even blow up your barrel. So you want to make sure you get all the solvent out of the barrel and out of the chambers. You don't want anything inside. You want it to be 100% dry. So what I do is I use the 12 gauge patches because they're a little bit bigger and they have a tighter fit inside the bore, and it can absorb a lot more of the solvent. But if you have a smaller caliber revolver, like a 38 or something like that, you don't have to use a 12 gauge patch because it's going to be too big, but go up one size bigger than what your caliber is. So if, let's say, you're shooting a 38, then use a 44 or 45 caliber patch, okay? If you're using a 45 caliber patch normally, or you have a 45, then go up to a 12 gauge, okay? So we're gonna do that right now. We're gonna do this final pass through, and then the bore and the chambers are gonna be considered clean, and then we're gonna focus our attention onto the outside of the gun and some of the parts in the crane here. We're gonna clean the crane, and we're gonna clean the forcing cone and some of the other areas around the revolver, the top strap area, and around the muzzle as well, okay? So that'll be the final part of our cleaning. And then once we do that, we're going to wipe off all the solvent from the outside of the gun and all the parts that we clean, just like we did with the bore and the chambers. We're going to make sure we get all the solvent off because we don't want the solvent to stay for a long period of time on some of the parts because it could corrode the parts over time. So you want to get everything clean and dry. And then the last thing we're going to do is just put a little bit of oil on the outside of the gun, and that'll be it for the basic clean. So stay tuned and I'll show you guys the final aspects of cleaning. All right guys, so now we're going to turn our attention to the cylinder. And what we want to do is we want to remove the crane from the cylinder so we can clean the crane and we can clean the ejector rod, okay? And it's very simple to do that on Smith & Wesson revolvers. All you do is you grab the ejector rod, and on the tip there's like a little knurled part here on the tip of the ejector rod. And what you're going to do is you're going to turn it counterclockwise, okay? And what that's going to do is that's going to remove the crane from the cylinder, okay? You're going to turn it counterclockwise, and we're going to remove the crane. Okay, and here's our crane, and you can see how dirty it is. Look at all the fouling and the dirt on the crane. We're going to set this down, and then we're going to take our little ejector star out and the spring. And you have to be very careful because inside of the ejector star is a little tiny spring inside. Okay, this little tiny spring right here. Okay, it's about 1 inch long, and it goes inside of the ejector star, okay? And you want to make sure you don't lose that, all right? So put it inside of the ejector star and leave it there. Set it aside somewhere so you don't lose it. And then you have the spring here for the ejector rod, okay? You want to put this spring aside as well. Put them together. Make sure you don't lose them. And now we're going to focus on the crane. We're going to clean the crane. We're going to clean the ejector rod. And we're going to, most importantly, clean the cylinder face, okay? And look at how dirty you have all these burn rings on the outside here. This is mostly carbon buildup, okay? There's some powder residue here, but a lot of this is carbon buildup. And we're also going to clean inside here where the ejector rod goes in, okay? So that's what we're going to focus on now. All right, guys, so to clean the cylinder face, what I like to do is just use a good old-fashioned copper brush here, and we're going to use a little bit of solvent, okay? Now, if it's really bad carbon buildup, the solvent and the copper brush are not going to get it off, and you need to use a special carbon remover, and I've done a video on that on my channel, and I'll attach a link up above. You can watch that video of how to remove the burn rings on your cylinders. And I use a product called Slip 2000, which is a non-toxic carbon remover. And that'll take all the carbon off if your regular solvent doesn't work. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to take a clean patch and we're going to hold it over the top of the bottle, and we're just going to dip a little bit of solvent onto our patch. And then we're going to soak the face of the cylinder here, okay? Get some solvent on there. Okay, we're going to rub some solvent on it. And now we're going to take our copper brush, and we're just going to use a little elbow grease, and we're going to try to scrub off these burn rings here, okay? And it's going to take a good amount of scrubbing, so be patient. You don't have to use a lot of force. You just have to go back and forth a lot, okay? You know, you don't have to be really pushing down hard, okay? Just, you know, light pressure and just going back and forth like so. And it should remove most of the carbon rings, the burn rings here on the cylinder face, okay? And it depends on how clean you want to get it. For me, you know, this gun is a working gun. It's not a safe clean. So I'm not concerned if there's like a little tiny little burn ring left. You know, I'm not trying to sell this anywhere, or, you know, this isn't a collecting gun. This is a working gun that I use for my penetration tests, that I use for bear country when I'm hiking in bear country. And this is a gun that I use for hunting. So if there's a small little, you know, cosmetic burn ring, I'm not really too concerned about it as long as it's not too massive and it's not too big. Then, you know, but if it's like a little burn rings are more cosmetic than anything else. They're not really gonna affect your gun that much in terms of accuracy or anything else. So now we're gonna take a clean patch. We're gonna take a clean patch that's soaked with solvent after we've scrubbed for a good amount. And we're going to rub it over the face, and we're going to try to get some of the loose carbon buildup that we scraped off with the scrub, okay? And you can see how dirty this patch is getting, okay? All right, and now what we're going to do is we're going to continue scrubbing again. We're going to keep scrubbing. All right, guys, I did a lot of scrubbing on the cylinder face with just the copper brush and the Hops number 9. And look at how much of that burn marks there I was able to remove, okay, without using any carbon removers. And that was about 10 to 15 minutes of scrubbing. And I probably put over 100 rounds through this gun. And that was the last time that I scrubbed it so much. So it was about 100 rounds of burn marks here that I was able to scrub off. So now we're going to turn our attention to the center of the cylinder where the crane goes into. And we're going to just take a wet patch with solvent on it, and we're going to run it through the hole here in the middle. Okay? We're going to twist it around, making sure that we, give it a good scrubbing. Okay, look at this, guys. Look at how dirty that is. It's basically black. Look at that. All right, so we're going to keep going. We're going to keep scrubbing with the patch. Okay, look at how dirty this patch came out. All right, guys, look at how dirty that patch is. Now, this patch is still good to use. It's still wet with solvent, so we're going to pick up our crane, and we're going to clean the outside of the crane here with this solvent-soaked patch. Okay, we're going to try to clean the outside and wet it with solvent here. All right. We also got this little ring here that goes over the crane. We're going to clean this as well. Okay, we're going to run our patch around that and get a lot of the solvent on here. All right, and we're going to let it sit for a few minutes, let that solvent do its job. Okay, give it some time to work on its own. And if you let the solvent sit, you'll be able to wipe off most of the residue. You won't have to actually do any kind of scrubbing, okay? So we're going to let this sit now. All right, now we're going to take a dry patch, and we're going to run a dry patch into that crane hole and get the solvent out from inside. All right, because we don't want to have the solvent sitting inside there. We want to make sure we get all of the solvent out from any of the internal parts, because solvent is corrosive, and if you let it sit somewhere for a while, it's going to basically dissolve the metal. All right, and eat away at the metal. So we want to make sure we get all the solvent out of any little nook and cranny inside of our revolver here, okay? So we're going to put a dry patch through this. All right, get it nicely. All right, and look at how dirty it came out. Pretty dirty. Look at this. It's pretty dirty, okay, but much better than before. We're going to run another patch through it inside. Another wet patch with solvent. All right, guys, so now we got this patch soaked, and we're going to wipe the crane with it. Okay, we're going to try to get this crane nice and clean and see how much we can just wipe off without having to scrub. And we're eventually going to have to scrub this crane because it's dirty. Okay, we got this little ring here that goes around the crane, and we're cleaning this as well with the patch. We're also going to turn our attention now to the outside of the cylinder. We're going to clean right on the top here where the ejector star goes. We're going to wipe that with some solvent. And we're going to wipe also the outside of the cylinder here. There's little burn marks you can see right here on where every chamber is, because this is the side of the chamber where the gases come out. The gases come out of the cylinder face. So you get carbon deposits and fouling deposits here. So we're going to wipe some solvent around that area, and we're going to try to scrub these deposits off. And when you scrub these off, try to be careful with how you're scrubbing, because you can leave scratch marks on the cylinder, especially if it's stainless steel. All right, so we're going to scrub this very gently and get these little burn marks off. All right, you don't have to go too vigorous, just go very light in one direction. Okay, and it should take those burn marks off. Don't mind my boiler in the background turning on. Alright guys, so I did a little bit of scrubbing. As you see, very little effort, and I got all the burn marks off on the outside here. So you don't have to scrub too hard, you just very gentle pressure, otherwise you're going to leave scratch marks. Now we're going to turn our attention to the little dimples here where the cylinder lockup goes into, okay, and we're going to scrub that a little bit because you get some deposits in there. We're going to wipe a little solvent into these dimples. Got our solvent soaked patch. We're going to rub some solvent into these dimples here, okay, and we're going to scrape them. Alright guys, so the exterior of the cylinder is clean, the inside is clean, everything is clean. The cylinder is ready to go. So now we're going to turn our attention to the crane and clean the rest of the crane. We're going to scrub any dark spots that we see where we see any carbon buildup, okay? And you'll be surprised how the carbon just builds up all around the crane as those hot gases condense and get hard and solidify onto the crane. We're just going to scrub this crane here, any dark spots in particular. Okay, this is where having that smaller end of the brush is really handy to get into the little crevices, okay? And cleaning a gun takes a lot of patience. That's why I told you guys to put on a YouTube video or something long, maybe a movie, something that you can listen to, because it's going to take you at least an hour. It usually takes me an hour to 2 hours to do a basic clean. Okay, a quick clean usually takes me less than 30 minutes. All right, so be ready to sit down and clean for a while. Make sure you allocate enough time to clean. Alright guys, so I got the crane cleaned, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my attention now to the star, the ejector star, and we're going to put a little bit of solvent on this. We're going to wipe this whole thing with solvent, and we're going to scrub it with the brush, get any kind of fouling off, and then we'll be done with our crane, okay? And then we're going to turn our attention to the forcing cone area and all around the inside of the top strap and the insides here and the outsides, okay? So, all right guys, so now we're going to turn our attention to the forcing cone. Okay, the forcing cone is this part right here, okay? This is where the bullets go into the barrel, all right? And this area always gets fouled up really bad. And I don't know if you guys can see, but it's pretty black. It's pretty filthy in there, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take a patch. We're going to wet a patch with some solvent. And it's going to be the same protocol as we did with the cylinder face. We're just going to wet the forcing cone area here. All right? And you can actually already see some fouling coming off just by wiping it. And actually that's the first thing I do before I start to scrub, is I actually just take some solvent on a patch and I wet the patch and I rub it all around the top strap, okay, and all around the inside of the frame. And just rubbing it will get a lot of the fouling off, because the solvent is really strong, and any kind of fouling should just come right off. And look at how dirty that is. Okay, that's just from rubbing it for, 30 seconds, not even. All right, so we're going to rub the inside of the frame here. All right. The top strap tends to get really dirty, so make sure you rub the top strap a lot. Okay, look at how dirty that is, guys. Look at that. All right, so we're going to continue with just the patch. And once we're done rubbing with the patch and we get a lot of the loose fouling off as much as we can, then we're going to start to scrub with our brush. Okay, and we're going to scrub off the remaining fouling on the forcing cone and any other areas inside of the frame here. Okay, and we're going to use the smaller end to get into the area around the forcing cone. Okay, so you can see the forcing cone here. There's like a little part here that's not flush with the frame, and that's where you use the smaller end of the brush to get on the edge there. Okay, and to clean the edge off, the edge of the forcing cone. Okay, that's where you have that small part here that comes in handy. So I'm going to start scrubbing now, and hopefully we'll be done soon. All right, guys, so I cleaned the forcing cone. Look at how clean that forcing cone is. There's still a little bit of carbon in there, but I'm going to go shooting in a couple of days, and I have some more penetration tests to do and some more videos to film with this gun. So I'm not going to worry too much about that little bit of carbon. I may get around to that in a few months and get that carbon out, but it's all pretty clean in here. You can see the forcing cone is clean. Top strap is clean, okay? And the crane lockup area is another area that gets dirty because all the hot gases go out this way. So what I like to do is when I get into these really tight spots, I just take a screwdriver or even just an Allen wrench, and I take a patch and I put the patch around that Allen wrench, and then I soak it in some solvent, and then I can go into these little small tight spaces. For example, here, this little hole where the crane goes into, I can wrap a patch around an Allen wrench, dip it in solvent, and then go inside here and clean out the inside, okay? And I recommend you guys do that. Same thing inside of the crane here, you can do that as well, okay? You can go in here with your patch and clean out the inside. So we're almost done with cleaning. The only thing I got to do now is I just got to scrub around these portholes here. You can see there's a little dirt there from the gases coming out. Okay, so I just have to scrub that. And I'm going to clean my sights a little bit as well because some gases got onto the front sight, because as you see, the front sight is right by the ports. So I'm going to clean the front sight. And then we'll be mostly done. We're going to run one more patch through the bore after we clean all the exterior. We're going to run one more patch through the bore, a solvent-soaked patch, and then a 12-gauge patch to dry it out. Same thing with the cylinder chambers. We're going to clean the chambers one last time, and we're going to go into all the little nooks and crannies with our little Allen wrench and make sure we pick up any remaining solvent. You want to make sure you have no remaining solvent on any of your little parts here, especially on your springs And what I actually like to do is I like to oil these springs here, especially this little small spring inside of the ejector star. I like to take a patch, soak the patch with oil, and rub it on this spring here, because this spring could get corroded and rust and get damaged. So I like to put some oil on these springs here, okay? So, and then that'll be it, and then we'll finish up with a little bit of oil on the outside, and then we'll be done with our basic clean. Alright guys, so I cleaned all the outside of the gun, I cleaned the crane, I cleaned the cylinder, and now we're just going to take a dry patch and wipe the outside of the gun, make sure there's no solvent anywhere. We don't want any solvent sitting on the gun long term. Okay, so we're wiping all the little nooks and crannies here with the dry patch to make sure we get all the solvent out and this gun is 100% dry. Okay, that's what we want. And we're pretty much done here. Only thing we have to do is just to oil some of the gun. And we're going to run one more patch with solvent through the cylinder chambers and through the bore. And then we're going to run a dry patch to dry out the bore and the chambers. And then we're going to apply a little bit of oil to the crane. Okay, we're going to put a little bit of oil on the outside here of this shaft that goes into the cylinder. Okay, we're going to oil this area because it needs lubrication. We're also going to lubricate this part here of the crane as well. We're going to put a little bit of oil on the springs. All right, we're going to take a patch, we're going to put a little oil on a patch, and we're going to rub some oil on these springs to keep them from corroding. And then we'll put a little bit of oil on the outside. So that's what we're going to do, and then we'll be done with our basic clean. All right, guys, so now we're going to oil up the gun. We're going to take the crane, we're going to oil the crane, we're going to oil parts of the cylinder and different parts of the gun. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your favorite oil. I usually use the Hops number 9 lubricating oil. It's a heavier oil. And I don't lubricate the bore or any of the chambers with any oil. You don't want to put oil inside of the bore because that can cause your gun to explode, because the oil inside of the bore will increase the chamber pressures. So you never should put any oil inside of the bore, inside of your muzzle brake or your portholes. Like here on this pistol, we have portholes here. Never put any oil in any areas where gases are going to be escaping out of, okay? Because those areas, you need to keep them clear so the gases and the pressure can go out. If you start to put oil in the bore or in your muzzle brake or in your portholes, in your chamber, it's going to increase pressure, okay? And you could have a catastrophic malfunction. So I'm going to wet a patch now with some oil. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the springs for my crane, and I'm going to oil the springs, okay? Because we don't want these springs to get corroded. So I'm going to take this patch here soaked in oil. I'm going to rub this spring with oil, okay? Just to get a little coating of oil on it. Same thing with the larger crane spring, okay? We're going to rub it with oil. Make sure we get a good amount of oil. Get it nice and oily, all right? And this will protect it from corrosion, especially if you actually plan to use this outside. All right, so that's the first thing we're going to oil. And then we're going to also oil the crane. All right, the area of the crane that goes into the cylinder and into the frame, we're going to oil that because we want to lubricate that nicely. All right, so we're going to take our patch that's soaked with oil and we're going to rub it around these areas here. Okay, you don't have to go crazy with oil. I'm going to put a little more here. Okay, you don't want to put too much oil, because if you put too much oil, it's going to gum up, and you don't want that either. Okay, so you just need a little bit of oil, okay, just so it's a little bit slick to the touch. All right, so we lubricated our crane, And we also got our ejector star. Okay, we're going to lubricate our ejector star as well, because this area goes into the cylinder, and you want to make sure that's nice and oiled up so it doesn't corrode. Okay, even though everything here is stainless steel, but stainless steel can corrode as well. All right, so we're going to put some oil on the ejector star. Make sure we oil that up nicely. Okay, get this nicely oiled. Same thing, we'll do a little more on the crane. I like to put a lot of oil on the crane, okay, because I know it's going to be sitting inside of the cylinder and I want it to be nicely oiled. All right, so now we're going to assemble our cylinder back together now. And another area that you could put some oil is right underneath where the ejector star goes. You could put a little oil there as well, okay? But don't put any oil inside of the chamber. You don't want to do that, all right? So we're going to assemble our ejector now. All right, and then all you do is you just push down on a hard surface, and you're going to screw down your ejector rod here. Okay. So the threads engage. Actually, I forgot to put this little ring here that goes around the crane. Forgot to put that little ring on it. Alright, so then we just turn the ejector rod clockwise until it stops. Okay, perfect. Alright, so now our crane is back together. Now we're going to turn our attention to the exterior of the gun, and we're going to oil the exterior. And I like to always oil the sights, because even though my pistol is stainless steel, the sights are usually not stainless steel and they can rust, especially if you get water on them, and they have this little knurling here on the sights. So I like to oil the sights actually, so they don't rust. Okay, so I'm going to do that right now. Alright, I like to oil the sights. I know it's kind of funny, but I oil the sights up. And this is a stainless steel gun, so I don't really have to oil it that much. And that's pretty much it. So now I'm just going to oil the outside of the gun here. It's good to oil even a stainless steel gun, because what I noticed with me is when I carry this in the summertime, sometimes when I'm sweating and my sweat gets on the gun, even though it's stainless steel, the salt in my sweat will actually cause some surface rust on the areas of the gun where it drips. So that's why I like to put a nice light coat of oil, especially now that it's summertime and I plan to carry this in bear country. So I like to put a lot of oil on the outside in the summer, because I don't want my sweat to get on there and corrode the barrel. Okay, so the oil provides a little bit of protection. I like to particularly oil right where the grip meets right here where the end of the grip is. Water can get underneath the grip, so what I like to do is put a lot of oil right here, so it kind of seals it off with oil. Okay, and oil around the hammer here. And then once you put a lot of oil, you just want to wipe off the excess oil so it's not, too oily. Okay, so just wipe off any excess oil. You don't need to have like a slippery gun. You don't want a slippery gun, but you know, putting a little bit of oil is always good. Okay, so all right guys, so our gun is clean and it's oiled, and now we're just going to put the crane back on. Okay, and we're going to grab our screw. Now another thing I like to do is this crane screw, I like to also put a little oil on it so it doesn't rust. Even though it's stainless steel, I like to run it through an oily patch here. Okay, so it gets some oil on those threads. You could even put a little drop on there. Sometimes I'll put like a drop of oil on it. Okay, and then we'll just put the screw back in. And again, make sure you use the right size bit so you don't destroy the screw when you're tightening it. And that's pretty much it, guys. We got ourselves a clean gun, and it's ready for its next penetration test. So another thing that I'm going to do off camera is I'm going to run one more dry patch through the barrel and through the chambers, just in case any oil got in there. But that's pretty much it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot. And stay tuned for more gunsmithing type videos on my channel. And as always, take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 P's: prepare, practice, and persevere.